My boyfriend, our husky, and I embarked on our long holiday trip to see our families earlier today. 14 hours of this trip takes place on a major U.S. interstate highway. We were looking for places to make our last gas stop and found a place just off the highway. We pulled off in some desolate gas station and immediately were greeted by a fairly large, somewhat sketchy man taking not so subtle glances in our direction. We both were joking that maybe we chose the wrong gas station, and boy did we. My boyfriend suggested, while he pumps the gas and runs to the restroom, I take our dog and let him stretch his legs. Being a city girl, I know to always carry my mace and phone, especially at night. We diverged as soon as I make my way towards the ill-lit side of the gas station, and my boyfriend to the restroom. I made it not 30 foot from my car and was approached by a small chihuahua with a collar on, who happily greeted our husky. I looked around for an owner, while the two dogs got to know one another and continued to walk a patch of grass with our new follower in tow. My first instinct was to help the dog and find his owner, but in the back of my mind something felt very off, and to be honest, it felt off since the moment we pulled in. I immediately called my boyfriend and told him I found a dog and said,
"Hey, I found a dog, but something is weird."
He immediately abandoned his bathroom break and came out to meet me. While standing with our dog, and this dog who seemingly came out of nowhere, I felt eyes on me from the employees working outside. My boyfriend expressed concern about the dog being loose so close to a major highway, and further looked around for its possible owner. He approached one of the employees, who was changing out the trash liners right next to our car for some time now. He asked the employee if he had any idea whose dog this was. In perfect English, he replied, "I don't speak English," and anxiously turned around only to continue to go through the motions of changing out a trash liner he had been standing at this entire time. He then continued to watch us chase this dog around until the dog led us behind the gas station. With my boyfriend 5 feet behind me, I followed the dog to the back of the store. Behind the store, 10 or so big rig trucks sat largely in darkness resting for the night. Cardboard boxes and broken wooden pallets covered the dirt. A large man in a gas station uniform greeted me staring through a glass door. With my boyfriend out of view, I bent down to check the dog's tag as the man continued to stare. My boyfriend approached, and that's when the man behind the glass door's demeanor changed. Almost dejectedly, he opened the glass door, and I quickly asked, "Hey, do you know whose dog this is?" Nervously, he fumbled around with his words and replied, Yeah, that's my dog." We both exhaled and exchanged a look as if to say, "Something about that's really weird." We made our way back to the car, and my boyfriend remembered he still had to use the bathroom, so I settled back into our locked car. When my boyfriend got back to the car, he told me the same man we talked to at the back of the store followed him to the bathroom and stood behind him watching. It's when we realized just how creepy and surreal the last 15 minutes had been. As we drove away, we discussed the strange and creepy series of those events. How the whole thing felt staged or set up. Why did the employee act like he didn't know the dog when it belonged to his coworker? We immediately Googled that small town we had just stopped in, and discovered it had been a hot spot for human trafficking, and in recent months 60 people had been arrested. Was this just a string of eerie coincidences? Or was there something more sinister going on here? Alright everyone, buckle up because I got a long story for you. Back in 2015, I decided to change up my summer routine and become a camp counselor in Ferndale, New York. I'm a Northwest boy, so I decided to drive and make a road trip out of it. And it was a blast. The summer was broken up into 3 sections of 3 weeks. Each kid could stay for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, or the whole summer, which would be 9 weeks. The first 3 weeks were wonderful. Those campers had my heart. Amazing kids with amazing hearts. I don't have a single bad thing to say about them. Then the end of the first section came to an end, and I was told I was going to be put on a part of a team that is to drive to the airport and pick up new campers that were flying in. That's when I met, well, let's call him B. B looked like a fat emo early 2010 Justin Bieber, dressed in all black and was just kind of a loner. Tried talking to him, but it only lasted for so long because other campers were coming, so I had to talk to them as well. On the 2.5-hour drive back to camp, I was distracted by my co-pilot flirting with me. When we pulled up to the camp around 6 p.m., one of the campers very quickly approaches me and tells me all the things that B was talking about. In a nutshell, it was cocaine, flashing girls' genitals, and child pornography. I was horrified, especially since this poor girl looked like she had never been exposed to anything like that. I assured her that I would talk to him. It turns out that B was in my bunk. Shocker. I pulled him aside and told him that what he was talking about with the girl was completely inappropriate and should never be mentioned again. He said okay, and I told him to make up his bed. Of course, he didn't know how. I told him to get his fitted sheet out of his bag. He still didn't know what that was. So I pulled it out of his bag, showed him how to put it on, and very quickly ripped it off before he could sit down and told him to do it now. He made his bed and went out for free time, which was basically a time where campers could hang out with one another. I sat down on the porch, opened my Kindle, and began to read. 10 p.m. rolled around and it was now time for bed. My boys were back, including B, and the lights were out. It's worth noting that my bunk bed was tucked in the corner for privacy, with the sheet hanging down for the ultimate privacy. I loved it. Plugged in my headphones and put my phone between the springs of the top bunk to watch movies. As I was watching a movie, I heard some steps through my headphones. Suddenly stopped, I decided to open my curtain, and B was standing just 12 feet away, staring at my bed. What do you want, B? I have a question. Alright. I'm thirsty. That's a statement, B. Can I play my DS? No. Get a drink and go back to bed. Guys, I cannot emphasize how terrified I was. He must have been watching me for several minutes before I looked. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. The next morning, my co-counselor, Gabe, was back and I told him all about B. Gabe was not excited because he was the counselor that was with him all day and I was leading activities for the rest of the day. Throughout this day, I heard about his attitude and his disobedience. I mean, he's a child at fat camp. What do you expect? It wasn't until nightfall when he came out of his shell. Boys' camp was shaped like a horseshoe of buildings, and the other counselor and I would play Monopoly in the center of the boys' camp. It didn't take long before I saw some campers walk by in horror and anger. Here's what I heard during my hunt for B that night. I spoke to campers who claimed that he threatened to light people on fire, threatened to fight others, threatened to tie up young girls and rape them, attempted to shove a kid off a 2-story structure. I wish I was lying. Pulled the program director inside and told him that this kid needs to go. I very quickly shut him down and told him he didn't know anything about what he was talking about. We found B and got him out of bed. Thankfully, I was covering a different bunk and got some sleep actually this night. Gabe was screwed. The next morning at breakfast, one of my female counselor friends approached me and told me that B snuck out and watched her and her girl sleep while pleasuring himself at the window. I quickly told the head boys counselors, and he told me that he was in contact with his parents and that B was going home. We just needed to last one more day. Throughout this last day was a hellion. He cursed at counselors, outright defied basic instructions, like just drinking water to stay hydrated. And he also began to try and grope girls. The next night was the luau, so I was setting up some tiki torches. And who shows up but B? Proceeded to put his hand in the fire. I noticed and told him to leave. Later in the luau, it was in full swing, and of course, B wreaked havoc, making things super uncomfortable. Stalking girls, eyeing girls, touching himself through his shorts. He was pulled out and kept out and under supervision. Pulled my buddies aside and told them that we needed to stay up, because I didn't trust B at all to not try and do something to a poor unexpecting girl while they were sleeping. So we set up a rudimentary alarm on the back entrance to the bunk, and we all stayed up on the front deck watching The Godfather. Around 1 a.m., B tried to escape. When we got back inside, he was on top of his covers pretending to be asleep. Around 3 a.m., we heard grunting, like scary grunting. We were scared he was hurting one of the other boys, so we opened up the door and saw him spread eagle on his bed, masturbating vigorously while speaking to some quote-unquote entity. His voice was deep, and I just remember hearing him say,
"Yeah, give me that blood, you slut."
Closed the door and just tried to forget what we saw. One by one, everyone fell asleep except for me. I was determined to make sure this kid did no harm to anyone. The sun rose and the kids all went to breakfast. Then I finally got some sleep. I was woken up in a daze by my boys shaking me. "Class Mill House, B struck again." Turns out this last violent act of this kid was to take a birdhouse out of a tree and beat a kid in the head with it until he was bloody and unconscious. I felt like a complete failure. It's worth noting that I'm a Christian, hence why I didn't really want to flirt and have a fling with a cute co-pilot I drove with. I only mention it because I wasn't about to let this kid have the last word. I believe everyone is worthy of some type of love, despite the fact that this kid is the first and only kid I've ever thought of as evil. Couldn't help but try to help him and plant a seed of love. He's being held in the office waiting for the police and his parents, so I go down and ask to talk to him. I get on his level, and we look into each other's eyes and I say, I know why you did what you did just now. I know it was because you couldn't do anything last night. Your rage must have been pent up all night, but I want you to know that I still love you because God still loves you. If you saw this kid, you could have assumed that I had insulted his very existence. I never had someone look at me with such malice. I got up and walked away and got in line for lunch. Anyway, that's my creepy encounter. I tried to include as much detail as possible for you all, and I hope you enjoy the story of this crazy camper I dealt with all those years ago. To preface this, I love to drive, like long drives to nowhere with no destination in mind, just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in Nebraska, I'd often take roads or lonely highways cutting through the countryside to small towns, and eventually cities, and I'd usually take these drives at night since there was less traffic to worry about. I've done it since I've had my license 4 or 5 years ago. I've never once had any sort of issue, nor have I ever run into any trouble. That was until a few nights ago. For reference, I'm a relatively small 22-year-old female, and as I've stated before, I often take these drives completely and utterly alone. They're a good way to clear my head when I'm stressed, upset, or overwhelmed, or for me to get a plan together to sort some personal issues out. I've also done these long and lonely drives to get away from the toxicity of my household, when I used to live with my parents as a mean of coping with their alcoholism. Though now that I've moved out, I'm in a much better place mentally, and I don't have the urge to get in my car and just drive anymore. However, on this night this event took place, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious with a clusterfuck of personal issues I'd rather not get into here. Felt restless and irritable around my boyfriend. I just couldn't focus on anything else, and decided I would take a drive to clear my head. My boyfriend was understanding, and told me to be careful and not be gone too terribly long, since it was getting pretty late. I agreed, gave him a kiss goodbye, and left. I drove around our city for about 30 minutes, when I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life. So I then decided to drive further north down a familiar, dark, and winding one-lane highway. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour, taking the turns at a slower pace, just in case a deer jumped out around the bend, and was admiring the vast empty darkness of the snow-capped fields and barren trees. It was honestly a bit creepy being all alone with no cars in sight. In seemingly the middle of nowhere, the few houses miles back from the road were lightless, and the dead cornfields withered away in the covered snow. It was something out of a horror movie, and I half expected to see a ghost pop up in my rearview mirror, or see someone clamber out from the patches of trees dotting the horizon. The only light came from my headlights, and even then I was still strained to see through the inky darkness of the night. By now, it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made it to that familiar roundabout that would either take you to a small town or back up towards the city, I would head back to the city and back home. That roundabout was still maybe 15 to 25 minutes away, but other than my imagination picturing the worst, I really wasn't all that concerned. I mean, I was by myself. I didn't have any other motorists to worry about, right? Wrong. As I'm rounding another bend, I noticed a vehicle with its hazards, flashing maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. Some sort of sedan, dark colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder, while the rest would jut it out onto the road. Like they had to pull over in a hurry, but didn't quite manage to do that. The driver's side door was flung wide open, and as I slowed my vehicle down and angled it towards the opposite side of the road to pass, I could make out what looked like maybe blood on the inside of the open door. I didn't see anyone on the road or in the car. I was the only motorist in sight. Cell phone reception is spotty at best in this part of the country. more often than not, you couldn't get a reception no matter how hard you prayed, which was definitely the case when I took a glance at my phone to see if it had any service. So, a lone female on the road, at night, pulling up near a vacant vehicle that looks like someone had been attacked on the inside with no cell phone service. Now, I'm no dummy. I watched countless episodes of Investigation Discovery and Criminal Minds and read far too many true crime books to know that this had bad and danger written all over it. There's still a small part of me worried that something terrible had happened to whoever was in that vehicle, and I thought maybe I could help. These roads don't get a lot of traffic late at night, and temperatures were well below freezing. If someone were hurt or in trouble, there was no one, and nothing else to help them but me. Still, I erred on the side of caution, still driving my car, though a bit more slowly. As I approached the vehicle, I rolled down my passenger window a bit, shut off the music, and called out, "Hey, anyone there? Are you okay?" Didn't hear a response. I was worried they were passed out somewhere, but I wasn't about to get out and look for them. Told myself I'd call out one last time, and if I didn't hear anything, I would leave, and the moment there was reception, I would call it in. And if I did hear someone, well, I'd figured out my next course of action then. So again I shout, "Hey, what happened? Are you okay?" There was a silence for a beat, and then I heard rustling in the shadows of the trees, followed by a gruff voice saying, "Yeah." I was relieved at first, and was about to say something in response, or possibly even stop my car and get out, when I noticed three things nearly simultaneously. As I inched my way past the front of the sedan, I noticed there was no damage to the hood, or anywhere else on the vehicle, which I found to be strange considering the blood on the inside of the door. My rearview mirror, I caught a glance of someone coming out from behind the sedan, and they were making their way towards my car, fast. The person did not have blood on them or appeared injured in any way, wearing a mask. Not like a mask for COVID or a ski mask or anything normal, but one of those masks you would see in the Purge movies. They were holding something in their hand. Don't know what it was. I couldn't get a good look, but from its length and shape, my guess was maybe a tire iron or a crowbar or something. I don't need to tell you that I slammed on the gas the moment I noticed those things and drove like a bat straight out of hell, my heart thundering in my chest and my entire body shaking. The window was still rolled down in my haste, and the music was still shut off, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me. Though I had no clue what they were saying, I just knew I had to get out of there immediately. Stole one last look in my rearview mirror as I drove away, mostly to see if they were still in their sedan to follow or chase, or if they had stopped. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road watching me. And right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a second man emerge from the trees that had been rustling earlier, also wearing one of those same masks with no trace of blood on him. I probably broke every law for speeding that night, but I wanted to get as far away from those men as possible. As soon as I made it to that roundabout, I turned towards town, parked in the Walmart parking lot that thankfully still had cars from who I assume were workers closing up shop, and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown. When I could pull myself together, I called one of my friends T, who was a police officer, to tell him what had happened, and what should I do. He was concerned for me, and after asking if I was okay, where I was, and did they follow me, he told me since I was out of city limits, he couldn't do much on his end, but that he could get in contact with the local police and sheriff in that jurisdiction to take up my statement and check it out. I agreed, thanked him, and while I waited for the police to show up, I called my boyfriend. Through my hysterical sob and panic, I managed to tell him what had happened, not even 10 minutes or so ago. He was, as you can imagine, super freaked out for my safety and wanted me to either come home immediately or drive himself down to take me home. I told him that the police were on their way to take my statement, so I couldn't leave and that I was okay, but I stayed on the phone with him until I saw that familiar police cruiser pulling into the lot. I gave the police my statement, and they assured me they would go back to the spot I told them the sedan had been to, and take a look and see if they could try to catch the guys who did it. Though with no cameras and no description of the men, I wasn't sure they'd be able to. I didn't even get the license plate number, though at the time in my panic, I thought it never came to my mind until the police were asking if I got it. All they had to go off of was a dark color sedan and two guys with masks. After I gave my statement, I went home and stayed curled up close to my boyfriend the entire night, listening to every sound the house made in fear it would be those same men, arriving any minute to finish whatever it was they had started. Since that incident, I haven't heard back from the police about whether or not they have any leads. I'm not sure they ever will. I'm just thankful I'm still here, and I didn't stop my car or get out. I'm not sure what would have happened to me if I had. I still have so many questions that have no answers. What were they doing? Why? Was that blood on the inside of the car or just a ruse to get more attention? If it really was blood, did they hurt someone else? Could have happened to me if I stopped my car. Needless to say, I won't be going on any more late night drives to anywhere. And I hope to never cross paths with those freaks ever again. This happened on Saturday. My girlfriend Tess, my puppy Jack, and I are all getting ready for a road trip. Planning on meeting some friends at their house and then starting the trip from there. On their way to the house, around 11 a.m., a white car with all tinted windows cuts us off and brake checks us close enough that I had to slam the brakes and swerve to avoid an accident. In immediate fury, I honked and flipped the driver off. Really wish I wouldn't have done this. Immediately, the driver rolls down his window, waves his hand over. He slows down to go back into the other lane so the other cars are parallel to one another. The driver is gesturing wildly and yelling at us while continuing to drive down this avenue. I proceed to make gestures to calm down and then to try to ignore him and continue on driving. He continues driving right next to us. Eventually, I try speeding up and he revs right in front of me and brake checks me once again. At this point, I swerve to the other lane. Again, he slows down to match my vehicle's speed. He is still gesturing and screaming while I try to ignore him. Suddenly, he reaches in his lap and I notice he is holding a glass bottle. Throws it and shatters on the side of my vehicle. Tess is hysterical at this point, and the pup had hidden under the passenger seat. I go into adrenaline mode and try turning down different streets as the chase ensues. He is following close behind when he throws another glass bottle that shatters against my back window. I tell Tess to call the police as we speed down to 2-lane street and up onto a hill. She calls 911 as I come to a stop at a light on the top of that hill. The guy chasing us slows down to a stop right behind us. Suddenly, he hops out of his vehicle and in my rearview mirror I see him reach back into his car and grab something and pulls it into his shorts. He begins walking towards my side of the car as the car in front of me drives away. I nope the fuck right out of there, slammed on the gas and turned onto the next avenue. Within a minute, he is caught back up to us again, and I'm now on speaker with 911, explaining the situation and giving the details of his car and appearance. Tess is crying as we speed down a busy avenue, weaving in between cars at 20 above the speed limit. I'm updating the 911 lady with where we are, and she tells me to drive to the station. The next red light, he yells now audibly, "Do we have a problem? Don't fucking flip me off, man!" Trying to gesture that we do not have a problem. He's still trying to get me to get out of the car. The light is still red and he again hops out of his vehicle. And I again floor it through the red light and he continues chasing me as I make my way towards the police station. We're now accelerating and brake checking each other as he drives off the road. I make gestures that he should continue following, hoping to get him to the station. About a block from the police, we get stuck at a busy intersection. There are many cars around as he again walks up to my car. This time I'm boxed in and Tess is panicking. I'm looking for any escape options to no avail. The drivers around us notice and many put their windows up and lock their doors. And he comes right up to my window, slaps it with his palm and asks one more time if there was a problem. "Is there a fucking problem?" I again admittedly say no. 911 lady tells me not to engage over the speakerphone. He says, "Good." Gets back into his car and then speeds away. 20 minutes into this horrible car chase experience, we end up meeting up with the cops, and they say there was nothing they could do, even though I had updated him with more details of his direction and where he was last. We calmed down and then continued our road trip. So yeah, guy in the white unmarked sedan, let's not meet again. I'm fairly new to Reddit, and very new to Let's Not Meet. I very much enjoyed being creeped out by all your stories, but now I'd like to make my own contribution. A little background. I was 8, and my mother and my little sister and I were taking a road trip across Wyoming. This wasn't unusual, as we had family living all across the state, and my mom loved piling us in the car and driving. My memory of this event is patchy, and I remember it more for the way my mom reacted than for the event itself. Don't remember exactly where this was, or where we were headed, but anyone who has ever driven through Wyoming knows that the roads are mostly deserted. We'd been driving for several hours behind an older green and white truck, approaching a gas station, and I remember my little sister being so excited, because she wanted to get those little bottles made of wax that had juice in them. Green and white truck pulls into the gas station and we follow. We use the restroom, get some snacks, and my mom fills up on gas. We all then get back into the car and back onto the road. A little time passes, and my mom asks, "Is that the truck behind us, the same one that followed us into the gas station?" I turn in my seat and confirm that it's the same truck. Sit back down and continue gorging myself on snacks. But I sense that my mom is uneasy. She keeps looking in a rearview mirror and watching that truck. It was a long drive to the next gas station, and along the way, the truck behind us would speed up and get dangerously close to us, and then back away a little. After a stretch of several miles, we were nearing another gas station. My mom adjusts her mirror so she can see us in the back seat. She says, "I'm going to pull into this gas station and open my door like I'm getting out. Don't want you two to open your doors. Do not get out. Just sit tight and hang on." My little sister and I look at each other like, okay. I thought it was strange, but the look in her eyes scared me a little. My mom is a calm person, but she has this presence about her that makes you aware that she isn't to be messed with. All my friends throughout the years have been a little scared of her, which is odd considering she is just over 5 feet tall and maybe around 100 pounds. Anyway, we pull into the station and up to a pump. My mom adjusts her mirror to see behind us and opens her door with the car still running. The green and white truck pulls in and parks just to the side of the turn-in. Driver pops his hood, gets out, and comes over to the front of his truck and props his hood up. He starts messing around under the hood with his back to us. And from what I remember of him, he's a really big guy. But who isn't to an 8-year-old girl? My mom slams her door and peels out of the gas station. I turn in to see my seat and watch the man. He turns around like he was startled, looks right at us, quickly closes his hood, even though he's only been looking in there for a few seconds. At this point, my mom is driving so fast that I lose sight of him. I was terrified, and I knew it must be serious for my mom to drive like this. Up ahead, the road bent sharply to the left, and there was a small road to the right of a few buildings. Just before the bend, my mom slams on the brakes, pulls the steering wheel all the way to the right, and, as if we were straight out of an action movie, slides around the corner. She speeds through the small parking lot of one of the buildings and parks behind it. From our vantage point, we were hidden from traffic behind us, but could see anyone passing. A short time later, we watch a green and white truck speed right past us around the bend in the road. Obviously, my sister and I were very shaken up. My mom asked if we needed to use the restroom, and I said yes. She said she did too, but we would have to wait here for a bit and make our way to the next station. I'll never forget what she said next, because it was so out of character for her. She said, "I'd rather piss my pants in this car than be murdered on the side of this road." Little time passes and we got back on the road and we continued on our trip. Thankfully, we never saw that truck again. This was a strange encounter, and it was very scary at the time, but when I tell people this story, they don't usually think it was something to freak out about. Last Thanksgiving, I was driving home from college with my friend. We were both 21 females at the time. I live in a very isolated part of Arkansas that requires driving through an hour of hairpin turns in the mountains. There are lots of blind turns, and the whole time you're driving on the edge of huge drop-offs with no barriers. I'm usually pretty confident driving through the mountains, but we were in my friend's car, so I was going a lot slower than usual, driving about 5 over the speed limit. Almost as soon as we started the roughest part of the drive, another car was tailgating us really closely. This was stressing me out, and as soon as I saw somewhere I could pull over, I did. I pulled into a church parking lot, and my friend offered to drive the rest of the way, but I declined. It was now completely dark, and she'd never driven this route before. Got back on our way, and a few minutes later, I have to come to a screeching halt. There's a car stopped in the middle of the road. It wasn't on the shoulder, just stopped dead in the middle of the road. Friend is thinking they must have broken down, but can't call a tow because there's no service in this area. I immediately have a bad feeling and lock all the doors. Tell my friend to stay in the car no matter what. She's starting to get scared at this point, and then points out she thinks it was the car that was following us earlier. Can't tell, but I'm very scared too. It's parked right before that hairpin turn, so I can't pass it. My friend starts frantically telling me to go ahead, just pass it, but I don't want to get hit by a Mack truck or something, or fall off the mountain itself. I honk my horn. Nothing happens. No chance of calling for help. There's no cell phone service. We wait there for a while doing nothing. My friend is crying and freaking out, but I'm too scared to try and pass them. I honk a couple of times, and eventually a guy gets out of the car, comes back around and leans against his car just staring at us. My friend is freaking out even more, and I'm just frozen. Tell her not to make eye contact, and I'm ready to floor it if he does anything. But again, he just stands there, staring. He's not checking his car or anything. I try to stay calm and pray that another car will come along soon. This goes on for what seems like forever, but was maybe only 15 minutes. Just casually leaning on the back of his car looking at us still. Eventually, we see car lights in our rear view. And then the guy jogs to his door, gets back into his car, and speeds off, going dangerously fast. So there's obviously nothing wrong with this car. I start driving and not wanting to cause a wreck. We don't see anything else for a while, but we just pass that same car parked along a highway a little while later. It pulls back on and starts tailing us again. I try to speed up and get rid of him, but he keeps following us. Not long after, we finally get cell phone service, but I don't know if we should call the cops because nothing really happened. So I end up calling home and tell my brothers what was going on and tell them to wait on the porch for us. Car follows me all the way home, down the long drive to my house. I get to my house and my two brothers are waiting on the porch holding their deer rifles. I pull in and the car just goes to the end of the drive, loops around and speeds back off to the way it came. Tried to see its plates, but we couldn't quite make them out. And my friend really freaked out. And when I told my friends the whole story, for some reason they just didn't think it was a big deal. Either way, random guy in the middle of the mountains who followed us all the way home. Let's never meet again. Hey everybody, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button on this video, subscribe to my channel, as well as hitting that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. As always, please leave a comment below of a theme you'd like to hear next. I'm always in need of more stories, so if you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send that to my email. You can stalk me on Twitter, stalk me on Facebook, and stalk me on Instagram. All of those links are below. Pretty sure the next episode after this is going to be a pretty big collaboration with a few narrators that you've probably heard about before. Well, I guarantee you have. Hopefully to have that. I will hopefully have that Sunday. Yeah, probably Sunday is what I'm looking forward to releasing that on. And I don't know if y'all follow me on Twitter, because that's probably the place that I'm most active out of all of the social media things. But I guarantee I'll end up sharing it or liking it or making it known somehow. But I've been kind of a clingy ex-girlfriend, sliding into other horror narrators' DMs and hitting them up like, hey, can you check my channel out, and see if it's up to par? Would you like to do a collaboration together? And I, honest to God, didn't think this dude was going to hit me back up at all, but he did, because he's kind of a big deal, like a really, really, really big deal. So I will, if you follow me at all on Twitter or anything like that, I'm definitely going to make it known there, probably on Instagram as well. So look for that. I believe it's today's Tuesday, so he told me it's either going to drop tonight or on Wednesday night. I'm stoked. I'm fucking stoked. I don't know how I got lucky enough that guy is going to allow me to narrate a story on his channel, because I'm telling you, this dude's big. He's a big fucking deal. And I'm very honored and thrilled and in awe that this guy even allowed me to narrate a story on his channel, because, I don't know, he's just one of the greats, and I never expected to ever have the honor of being on that show, but I'm gonna be, so I'm fucking excited, man. I'm really, really, really excited. I'm also trying to get some stuff figured out and playing around with the live streaming so I can, talk to you guys and get some feedback immediately in those moments. So I'm messing around with that, and hopefully within the next few weeks I'll be able to actually do a full-on live stream. So we'll be looking forward to that. I think that's it. Thank you all so much for the support, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.